Welcome back to this video series focused on uncovering insights from Aristotle's Poetics for today's fiction writers. At the conclusion of the first video in this series, I noted that the key sections of the first major division of Aristotle's Poetics amount to only 267 words, all focused on the topic of representation. I further explained that these words can be divided into three subtopics: human action, moral standing, and moral nobility. Over the last two videos, we explored the first of these, human action. Now, in this video, we turn our attention to moral standing and moral nobility, beginning with the key passage from Aristotle. As representations, characters necessarily represent people who are either superior or inferior, better or worse than the reader. Differences in character derive from these categories, since it is by virtue or vice that people are ethically distinct from each other. Aristotle here emphasizes that ethical distinctions between characters are an inescapable element of storytelling. Every action or line of dialogue inherently carries ethical significance and can be evaluated based on both the moral framework presented within the narrative and the ethical perspectives of the audience. Viewers or readers will naturally assess whether they hold themselves to a higher moral standard than the characters portrayed. This dual layer of ethical scrutiny, one from the story's internal moral logic and the other from the audience's judgment, is an inherent feature of all narratives. The ethical distinctions between characters are not incidental to storytelling, but are central to defining their roles and purposes within the narrative. These moral differences shape characters' actions, influence the direction of the plot, and reflect the writer's engagement with fundamental questions of right and wrong. Virtue and vice do more than define characters. They form the moral foundation of the story's central conflict and stakes. Ethical distinctions between characters drive their decisions and interactions, reflecting their internal struggles and shaping the plot's direction. For example, a virtuous protagonist encountering moral dilemmas illuminates themes such as integrity or sacrifice, offering audiences a lens through which to explore broader ethical questions. In this way, the moral qualities of characters not only enhance their depth, but also underscore the narrative's thematic purpose. Writers therefore inevitably showcase human virtues and flaws through their characters, depicting diverse moral standings. That said, Aristotle states that serious writers tend to emphasize noble, morally upright characters and actions. Representation takes two different forms according to the character of the author. The more serious among them represented noble people and noble actions, and the more frivolous represented the actions of ignoble people. This is the distinction between tragedy and comedy. The latter aims to represent people as worse, and the former as better than people nowadays are. So, serious writers focus on portraying noble people and noble actions, aiming to depict characters as better than ordinary individuals, while the opposite is true of the more frivolous authors. This choice of subject matter reflects the broader artistic intent and personal character of the writer, a profoundly significant and often overlooked matter that we will discuss later. For now, let us first clarify Aristotle's distinction between serious and frivolous narratives. This distinction aligns closely with his analysis of tragedy and comedy. Much of what Aristotle outlines in Poetics for tragedy can apply to fictional narratives more broadly, especially when considering the structure of arc plot drama, what McKee and others define as a traditional classical narrative structure. Arc plot drama typically involves a protagonist who experiences a clear goal, faces significant obstacles, and undergoes a transformation that reflects moral or thematic growth. This is very much in line with Aristotle's concept of tragedy, which often involves a noble character's journey towards a significant revelation, transformation, or fall due to his flaw or mistake, leading to catharsis or emotional release. However, as Aristotle's concept of tragedy includes specific stylistic elements such as hamartia and catharsis and moral dimensions, these aspects do not always align with the broader range of narratives found in arc plot drama. For example, while arc plot drama generally follows a predictable cause and effect sequence towards a resolution, Not all narratives structured in this way include tragic elements or moral lessons in the Aristotelian sense. Tragedy often involves a deep exploration of character flaws and the impact of these flaws on the broader moral or social order, while arc plot drama could focus on a variety of narrative outcomes, some of which are not necessarily tragic or morally reflective. So, while much of Aristotle's structure for tragedy can rightly inform modern arc plot drama, especially in terms of plot development, theme, and character arcs, it is not an exact one-to-one correspondence. Certain genres and narrative styles may diverge from Aristotle's focus on moral elevation and the tragic consequences of a fatal flaw of character. Returning to the distinction between serious and frivolous narratives, tragedy, as Aristotle's serious form of narrative, aims to depict people and actions that elevate moral nobility. Comedy, on the other hand, being a frivolous form, portrays the actions of lesser or ignoble characters, often emphasizing flaws for humorous effect. Aristotle did not intend for every character in a serious story to be morally perfect or universally superior to the audience. Such a standard would be unfeasible. Rather, serious stories tend to emphasize moral growth or elevate the audience's sense of virtue, inspiring them to reflect on or aspire towards higher moral ideals. In contrast, frivolous stories typically entertain by exposing human flaws and imperfections without the same moral elevation. As we will discuss more fully in later videos, the goal of tragedy, according to Aristotle, is catharsis, the purgation of pity and fear through engaging with noble characters in dire circumstances. For the audience to experience this catharsis, they need characters who model virtues worth emulating, even amid their flaws or tragic downfalls. Moreover, as we will explore in detail later, Aristotle's emphasis on the tragic hero further indicates that moral perfection in characters is not required. The tragic hero, according to Aristotle, is a figure with a mixture of virtues and flaws. This blend of qualities is crucial for the audience's emotional engagement and the character's moral development. The hero's fatal flaw, often a tragic flaw or mistake, plays a pivotal role in the unfolding of the narrative, demonstrating that even a noble character is not exempt from flaws and the consequences they bring. This balance of virtue and imperfection is a key to the tragic experience, illustrating that perfection is not the goal. What matters is the depiction of moral growth, integrity, or the repercussions of moral failure, portrayed in a way that deeply resonates with the audience and fosters catharsis. Thus, it is reasonable to infer that Aristotle intended serious stories to elevate morality through key characters and their actions, leading to a morally meaningful experience for the audience. While not every character needs to be perfect or better than the audience, the story as a whole should aim to inspire through its depiction of virtue and moral struggle. If this is what Aristotle referred to as serious stories, what then did he mean by frivolous stories? Unfortunately, Aristotle's Poetics offers only a brief explanation on the subject, which can be found in the following quote. The more frivolous authors represented the actions of ignoble people. This is the distinction between tragedy and comedy. The latter, comedy, aims to represent people as worse than people nowadays are. Comedy is the representation of people who are inferior but not wholly vicious. The ridiculous is one category of the embarrassing. What is ridiculous is some error or embarrassment that is neither painful nor life-threatening. For example, a comic mask is ugly and distorted but does not cause pain. According to Aristotle, all comedy falls under the category of frivolous stories, but not all frivolous stories fall under the category of comedy. This is because comedy traditionally portrays characters who are inferior rather than noble or virtuous, yet not all characters who are inferior are comedic. We can note here that in modern times, not all comedies are frivolous. Frivolous extends beyond comedy to encompass any narrative that lacks an emphasis on moral seriousness or nobility. Stories that dwell on triviality, sensationalism, or base entertainment might also fall under the category of frivolous, since they neither aim for moral elevation nor engage with themes of virtue. This interpretation would align with Aristotle's broader philosophy, where art and storytelling are valued for their potential to inspire and contribute to human flourishing. By experiencing catharsis, audiences may gain insight into moral and ethical truths. Works that lack this purpose are deemed less significant. Second, Aristotle's view of comedy can be summarized as follows. In comedy, characters are portrayed as morally inferior, flawed but not wholly depraved, allowing the focus to remain on the embarrassing errors, ridiculousness, or distortions in human action that provoke laughter without causing discomfort or distress to the audience or crossing into horror. As John Truby observed, comedy stems from the human ability to recognize the contrast between the ideal and the real. Laughter arises when someone is abruptly reduced from a high ideal to a lower reality, often by being reduced to an animal, a child, or a machine. However, this reduction must not go too far. A woman slipping on a banana peel and landing on her back is funny, but if she slips and cracks her head open, it ceases to be comedic. In summary, this video explored the following. First, narratives inherently portray ethical differences between characters, shaping their actions and the plot, while being evaluated by both the story's framework and the audience's perspective. Second, serious stories inspire moral growth by portraying noble characters and actions, fostering reflection through their moral struggles, virtues, and flaws, and encouraging ethical contemplation. Third, frivolous stories entertain by highlighting flaws, triviality, or ignoble actions without aiming for moral elevation. While comedy humorously contrasts human imperfections with ideals, avoiding pain or distress, frivolity encompasses any narrative lacking moral depth or serious themes, not just comedic ones. In the next video, we'll continue our discussion of part 1 of Poetics and continue to take a close look at the concepts of moral standing and moral nobility. See you then.